All right, good morning and good afternoon to everyone. My name is Sydney Diedrich, and I am the Director of Marketing here at New Cloud and Ottawa Company. I want to thank you all for attending our webinar on 5 steps to boost your cyber resiliency, brought to you by New Cloud and Veeam. Today we're going to hear from myself, as well as Jim Lowry, a Veeam Solutions Engineer. And if at any time during the webinar you have any questions, please feel free to use the question feature on your screen, and we'll be sure to address all of those questions at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and dive right in. So to kick things off, I want to take a moment to look at the current state of cyber threats affecting companies today. Cybercrime has become an incredibly lucrative business for hackers. According to Cybersecurity Ventures, the cost of cybercrime worldwide is expected to reach over $6 trillion annually this year. In fact, it wouldn't be surprising if the actuals exceeded the estimate on this one, especially considering that escalated by COVID-19, cybercrime is at an all-time high. And over the past year and a half, hackers have taken advantage of uncertainties around COVID-19 to prey on businesses. And the FBI has reported a 300% increase in cybercrime over this period as well. And due to the shift to remote work that we've also witnessed as a result of COVID-19, many businesses are operating with reduced security parameters in place. Some employees are connecting to company servers from unsecured networks. They're connecting from coffee shops. They're connecting from home. And due to this, remote workers have actually become a leading cause of security breaches. 20% of organizations have reported that remote worker-related incidents have resulted in either catastrophic data loss, breaches to their network, et cetera. And those are just the ones that we know of. This number should be much higher in estimations, right? And in fact, we know that 95% of all breaches are caused by human error, according to CyberNet. And yet, while we see these facts, the facts tell us cyber threats are extremely prevalent. The truth is that we as humans tend to belittle the likelihood of an event occurring or happening to us. We hear about these things on the news, we hear about ransomware attacks, and we just don't believe that it's going to happen to us. And the reality is that being affected by a cyber threat is inevitable. At this point, it's no longer a matter of if you'll be hit or if your company will be attacked. It's a matter of when. So with that, I'd like to kind of take a moment to establish, what is cyber resiliency? We know where we stand from a cyber threat perspective. Let's talk about how we build cyber resiliency within our organizations. So what is cyber resiliency? First off, let's define this term. We consider a cyber resilient organization to be one who is prepared to respond and to recover from cyber threats. And that's not to say that a business who is immune from, that's not to say that any businesses are immune from cyber threat. We've already established it's only a matter of time until your business is affected by a breach, if it hasn't been already. But we know that cyber resilience comes from being proactive and taking steps to reduce the impact of a threat once you face it. So if you're still thinking, well, this won't happen to me, my data isn't important to a hacker, my industry isn't at risk, I'm here to tell you it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. It doesn't matter what your business's data that you're collecting is, the level of importance to you is. Everyone's at risk. Every sector, every vertical, every industry can and will be hit by a cyber threat. And while no one industry is excluded, verticals like healthcare and financial services, they're especially at risk due to the sensitive data that they handle. Hackers know that for these companies, downtime means loss of life, it can mean loss of funds, and they're likely to get payment quicker. So if you are in these industries, this is especially important for you to be proactive, but regardless of industry, again, everyone should be aware of cyber threats that are affecting companies and be ready and able to respond should something happen. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Jim Lowry with Veeam to talk about infection approaches and maybe run through what we can do to become more cyber resilient.
Awesome. Thanks, Sydney. I appreciate it. And everybody, I appreciate your time. As Sydney mentioned, my name is Jim Lowry. I am a systems engineer at Veeam that focuses specifically on the managed service provider market. So we see a lot of these these pieces come together, and specifically with New Cloud and just how effective they are at this particular um, challenge with cyber resiliency and data protection. They're one of the best in the business for sure. So some different approaches here on ways that things will happen. None of this should be very new, but it should familiar, but it doesn't mean that it's still not a valid vector of attack. Attacks are getting more and more sophisticated every day. And as Sydney mentioned earlier, it's not a matter of if you get attacked, it's a matter of when, or you have been successfully at defending the attacks. So you either defend them successfully or they get through and you don't know about it for a few months. And once we find it, how do we recalibrate and get the bad pieces out and re-protect our data? Or what we'll kind of go over today, different ways to mitigate that from the risk from happening. There is no one perfect solution. The approach is really going to be based on a myriad of different approaches used in tandem to really increase that resiliency so that people looking to provide ransomware or any other type of attack, data breach, will go for an easier target. So some of these common approaches, Trojan horses, email phishing scam kind of thing, they hide something in there, you download something or it's built into something. A lot of this is going to be covered from downloads from third-party sites or locations where people aren't necessarily buying it legitimately, or even accessing stuff that's fine and is totally legitimate, but people will sneak things in there all the time, right? Removable media, and I found this statement here by a Google study really intriguing, and I had never thought of it this way before. But removable media, if you drop a USB stick with something on there, including a Trojan horse or a virus of some kind, about 50% of the people in this study would pick up that USB and put it into one of their computers to see what was on the disk. Curiosity was the driving factor there. Oh, hey, I wonder what this is. And that was a very eye-opening statistic for me when I saw that. That 50% of the people were just so curious, we'd go plug it in. I had to stop and think if I've ever done that, because I may have, and it's just like, oh crap, I can't do that anymore, right? So very interesting data point there. Really enjoyed seeing that to help me improve. So malvertising, so people are going to add potential code or snippets of code or little things to download on accident when clicking on a website's advertisement, so that it looks like a legitimate ad, but they're piggybacking something underneath the covers there that you're not aware of, and neither is the ad provider. Social media, simple message services, email. If something doesn't look legit, don't open it, right? And then ransomware as a service is one of the things that's becoming very sophisticated. Ransomware attacks are people who are going for big dollars or lots of everybody working together to get a smaller piece of the pie, but still getting some revenue by being more sophisticated and catching more illegal gains that way. So let's talk a little bit more about something very specific here. What happens if you're hit? So it's not a matter of if, it's a when. And so when you get attacked, you either are successful at defending the attack or they get through, and you either know it, they got through, or you don't know that they got through. But eventually it will be discovered that, hey, something happened, I've been hit, they got through. What should we do? First thing, remember that paying the ransom is not our philosophy here at Veeam or at New Cloud. Our idea is to restore the data and protect the data itself and not pay the ransom. And what I have found over the last few years as it's become a lot more prevalent in discussion, a lot of people are not aware that US-based companies or auditors, if anybody, according to the Department of Treasury, and there's a link for that, it's very easy to find online, any party involved in paying a ransom to somebody who's holding your stuff hostage with ransomware can be fined and penalized for paying it. And that includes the banks that help do it, insurance companies that say, we'll cover the loss, don't worry, or the people who are actually paying the company that's actually been breached. And so that was, a lot of people were very unaware of that, it's a very important piece of information to look at, and to go look at with your legal team and your security team to make sure that you've got a really good mitigation strategy in place for when you do get hit with ransomware, or if you do. So the other thing to keep in mind is that new cloud and Veeam support, we have the ability to work with you immediately. It's a big issue. If you get it, you don't want to do any changes before you can. Just immediately call into our support team and you would say, we've been attacked by ransomware. We think we've been locked up. I need your help right now. We have a specific team and experts within the support organizations available 24/7 for this specific thing. It's what they do day in and day out. We have a lot of really great operations that we can use in the background to help recover and prevent and determine what's been infected. And those strategies are constantly being updated as time moves on. So that's the first thing you want to do, is always, if you think you've been hit, call into the support center and get that system going up as fast as you can. That's our approach. We want that data up and reliable. All of Veeam's backup products are designed specifically to make the restore as fast and reliable as possible. So everything we do keeps that in mind, including our ransomware attack strategies. So we're going to talk a couple of different ways, five different types of things we can do to really focus on cyber resilience. The first one is updates, security patches, and this applies to Mac and Linux as well, because that's still kind of the Wild West in attacks, but they are coming across a lot more frequently now. So always keep things patched up as best you can. Make sure you do your due diligence with lab testing and everything, obviously, before you do major rollouts, but keeping your stuff, antivirus software updated and your security patches going is critical first step. Auditing and security. So a lot of services, like in the financial services or healthcare services, will be required to have random audits. Same with publicly traded companies or whatever. But you want to make sure that you're actually utilizing that audit well. Having been on the customer side during security audits, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of difficulty, but it's absolutely critical and worth it. You need to put the time in there to get a really good auditor that knows what they're doing, and then follow the practices that they recommend or the resolutions to different things that pop up. Education. You got to stay smart. You got to be current on what's going on. So not just technically current and understanding the newest things, but your employees need to be trained and educated and constantly updated and reminded around good solid practices that for different things like passwords, don't click on links if they look silly, report phishing if you find it to your help desk areas. All of those kinds of things are critical to understand and know to do. So don't think of education just as I've got my security certificate, I'm good. I know what I'm doing all the time. You've got to stay current there, absolutely. But you need to educate all employees because anybody can be a vector of attack. And then finally, the fourth and fifth buttons here or topics to cover are backup, right? Specifically, because you'll have we want to make sure that, number four, that your pertinent data or your crown jewels are not only backed up, but preferably not accessible to people who are standard users who don't have need for it, right? So you have an offsite copy somewhere would be the fifth option as well, of making sure you have an offsite protected way to protect that data to recover from, but also make sure you're using proper control access and least credentials necessary for each user you create. Let's see here. My mouse is wandering just a little bit. Let's see if I can get it to, there we go. Okay. So the very first thing when we talk about backup strategy is which is what we're focusing on right now. The 3-2-1 rule. So over time, the 3-2-1 rule that we created 15 years ago, we just had our 15th birthday a couple of days ago. We've added a little bit, 2 more numbers to that. So 3-2-1-1-0. Colloquially, we'll still refer to it as the 3-2-1 rule, but just because it's easier to say, people are more aware of it. But the last two, 0, 1 and 0, are also very important. So you want to have different copies of data, right? Ideally, you've got your production copy, you've got a local backup copy, and then an offsite tertiary copy somewhere else. Or sometimes people even do like a fourth level if you're going to tape, or a deep archive object kind of a place. But you definitely need to have more than one copy of your data to be resilient. You want to make sure you have different media as well. So if I have my local servers and some, SATA drives or even some flash drives there locally running off that specific file system of a Windows or a Linux machine, well, you'd want to make sure you get something else on a different media as well to help recover. So object storage in a different platform entirely would be considered different media. A tape device going to immutable or air gap pieces of it are all different ways to do that. The big strategy for using different media types is around critical failure. You don't want one system that could have disk failures or system failures that makes it so you cannot use your backup copies if your production copies go offline. So you're trying to minimize the risk with using a specific vendor media type that could have some issues that propagate down to all of the copies of your data. The first copy, or number one here for 321, offsite copy. You want to get it somewhere offsite production site. That can be within the same region, that can be within the same city. I would not consider it to be a different site if it's within the same data center. You can make an argument around that you can apply it that way, but ideally what you're thinking of with an offsite copy is something that's completely different location, completely different power structure, and power grid, internet separation, so that you don't have to worry about a regional disaster bringing everything offline. But there are obviously really good ways to use a copy locally as well for things like a metro cluster, where you want to have very resilient and automated failover orchestration setups. So it's absolutely a viable technology that we recommend doing for resilience and data recovery. But for an off-site copy, you want to make sure that's something you can keep separated as best you can. One of the things that you would definitely want to do is the second or new one is offline and air gap or immutable support. Not only do you want to make sure that the medias are different, but you want to make sure that they're protected. So they're being able to use strategies like immutable object storage, or what we'll go over a little bit later in the presentation with our hardened Linux repositories and the XFS file system. Those are great ways to help protect that data from a couple of different vectors of resiliency and attack. And a lot of people are people have been saying that I have the tape killer, right? The tape is dead, it's not used anymore, but it's still so viable, and it's still a very resilient technology, and it's very efficient for writing, right? It's writing to a tape array is just as fast as writing to an SSD array. It's the reads that take a while, right? So, but air-gapped tape is a great solution, or you can use a VTL appliance as well with the same thing. But using that air gap mechanism to only power that system on while the backup job's running, as soon as that backup job is done, you disconnect it or power it off from the network again. Nothing can encrypt that. Ransomware can't go in and get that. Right? It's not possible for something to go in there and pull stuff out of it if it's offline. So air gap with tape is still a very, very powerful tool. And finally, the 0, you want to make sure that everything you're backing up and need to do a restore from is viable, that it's not corrupted, that there's no bits missing, that you can actually do the restore and test it. This is where the benefit of using DR strategies to do testing of failover sites to make sure that things are working. And we have a very solid solution for that problem to make it very easy for you. So here's a couple of different things that from the NIST framework on data protection. There are 5 different areas here that you want to focus on, and Veeam has a couple of different ways of approaching each one of this, and this is by no means comprehensive. So we want to identify any type of resiliency issues or access control. So you can tag the data, make sure you have the right credentials set up for, or that you have networking set up. You want to create different views in the business so that people who, a C-level person may only want to see just kind of a graphical output, but they don't necessarily need access to go see all of the other data there's in beneath that that output that you would create for them. Protection of data, we've got immutability, air gap, tape with worm will work very well here as well. Worm being write once, read many. And then sure backup and sure replica are great tools that we can use to verify and schedule verification around backup infrastructures entirely, not only just the machines, but all of the machines tied to that critical system, that application group of machines. You can automate and test and verify that those systems would work and the failover plan that you've created is viable by testing it. We'll build it on the fly in the background as a bubble network that's completely isolated. And you can go in there and validate that the system you have in place will work and will fail over. So great tools for that. We have a lot of monitoring and alerting options around our systems, and not just on the Veeam products, but being able to do it with the underlying infrastructure as well, including VMware hypervisors or Hyper-V down to the storage underneath all of those. So either direct storage or even data stores. We can get alerting and information about all of that and monitoring about all of that using Veeam One. We can also use leverage our very, very powerful API set. We have a very, very good API and PowerShell commandlets for all of our products that will allow you to do a lot of custom monitoring if you would like, or integrate into something like SolarWinds or other competing products if you don't want to use Veeam One. We absolutely want to help you there. From a responding tech point of view, we can automate DR failover. So if X happens, I can go kick off failure plan Y immediately. And that can be literally orchestrated based on whatever parameters you want to set, so to make sure that everything is good. And we can also create failover plan documentation from that process that you would set up in advance, so that you can test everything and create a run book on the fly. That's very, very powerful. And finally, from a recovery standpoint, we have the ability with immutable systems. Well, for example, what happens if somebody with ransomware attacks you, right? And for whatever reason, that bug or that ransomware was sitting for 6 months before kicking off, right? That day zero clock was 6 months away. And then all of your backup copies, including immutable copies, start getting that virus, and countdown is put up into those copies. So you know that once you've detected it and are going to remediate it, well, it's in mutable storage now. How do I get rid of it? Because I can't overwrite it. I can't encrypt it. That's the benefit of immutable storage. But that doesn't prevent us from reading anything or recovering anything. So even though the data as it sits on that immutable storage is not deleting, or I can't edit it, I can create a new block that's right next to it for pointer purposes. So before I bring any system back onto a network that would be susceptible to ransomware attacks, I can boot it up, turn it on, run virus checkers, or perform any remediation tasks that need to happen before putting it back into production. And that's a very, very powerful tool to be able to go set this kind of thing up and guaranteeing your recovery of your data. And that's the beauty of what our focus being restore speed and resiliency of that data is critical. So when we take that approach, we come up with these really wonderful innovations around doing so. And again, this is by no means a complete list. We will absolutely have more than this. We can do more of a one-on-one discussion around any questions you've got. So let's talk a little bit more about secure restore. I talked a little bit about it. It's like, hey, if I've got something that's been propagated down from this ransomware Trojan horse and things are coming up, what can I do for it? Or if we have found that in our production systems, we saw our virus checker found something, well, what do I need to do to mitigate it on the copies of my backups or verify that it's gone? And this is where secure restore is really great. You're able to do an instant VM recovery if you'd like. or you can restore it to a different location, but in that restoration process, you would be able to go in there and edit and scrub whatever you need, even if the source backup copy that you're restoring from isn't immutable, because we're not overwriting or encrypting any of those things. When something is written using the S3 API to be an immutable flag, it cannot be changed. And it can't be edited, it can't be encrypted, it can't be deleted until that threshold, whatever expiration date you set, is met. So with the secure restore, we have that ability to keep all of that data in place, but also read and restore to new locations, and that immutability flag doesn't transfer with it because it's based on the object itself that's in that object bucket of the S3 bucket. And S3 meaning not just Amazon S3 services, but a bunch of storage vendors as well who have adopted the S3 protocol. And we have a very strong list of integrations with various storage plays for immutability support. And Blob, which is the Microsoft API for object, immutable support for object and Blob will be coming soon. It's on our roadmap. We're still testing it and verifying that everything's available, and hopefully have it out ready and proven by Q1 of next year. So Secure Restore is one of the great ways to address verification of backups, but also know that your restores will work. So from our resiliency standpoint with ransomware, these are the three main things that we've kind of talked about. We want to make sure that our users are educated, that our administrators are educated about what to do, what the best practices are in those roles, because each user will have different roles, right? So they'll have different strategies based on the role-based access control. We want to make sure that we have the ability and infrastructure to back up and recover. So we want to test all of that kind of stuff to verify that it works. And then ahead of time, we would want to create a remediation plan so we know what to do and where we would go about doing that. And that's something that your Veeam or new cloud engineering teams can absolutely help you design and put into place. So some of the capabilities that would be working with some of this, we've kind of already covered, but using Veeam 1 for some detection, things like CPU utilization that's out of the norm. Because if something is just out of the blue running and all of a sudden your entire system is running 20% hotter on your CPU utilization, we can alert on that and have an investigate to see if ransomware is trying to encrypt something. We've covered the 3-2-1 rule, immutability, API, and then a bunch of the other wonderful features here. Secure Restore, Data Labs, which is very similar in concept of creating that bubble network I mentioned and isolate it, but using the actual copies of your system production data, but not on the production equipment, to go test everything to verify that it is resilient and that it does come back on with no issues. So the SOBR stands for Scale Out Backup Repository. And this is conceptually very similar to something like what a data store is in VMware. When you create a new data store in VMware, you have multiple different storage devices that you can connect. They don't have to be identical. They don't have to be the same size. They don't have to be the same anything. But they need to be able to connect in to VMware either through a NAS connection or a SAN connection or direct attached, so that I can create that logical wrapper around all of the systems and then use VMware's file system, VMFS, so that it will control where the data goes when it gets to the actual physical storage. Scale-out backup repositories are very similar conceptually, where I can have different types of storage on the same repository that people are connecting to. So I can have SSDs and object and NAS shares or SATA drives in a JBOD. All of those things can be used, USB drives, as part of that bucket and logical wrapper for one large space of data available. And one of the great things about doing it this way is that we can now tier into capacity tier and archive tiers. which is where we would apply the immutable S3 APIs and blob when that comes out as well. So you create a policy and you can define when that policy will be kicked off or how long to retain. When should I move stuff up into the cloud, into object or into immutable storage? And you can set all of that stuff up, and then in the background, it will always run with you. One of the best features that came out about a year and a half ago, maybe a little longer than that, was the ability to do, trying to remember the right way to say that, the ability to move data backups directly into object immediately and make them immutable. So I don't have to wait for a policy to say once local storage repositories are 7 days, then move stuff into object and make it immutable. We can make a copy of any backup job, incremental or full. The moment it's done processing, we can make a copy of that, so you still have it local, but that copy will then be moved up into object and is flagged as immutable. So I don't have to worry about finding a backup that is 30 days old and figure out how do I recover that extra 30 days of backup if I have to roll back that far. With Veeam, you can restore to your most current backup, even if you know it's got that that virus in there or ransomware code. I can still do that secure restore that we talked about off my latest backup, my most recent, and then be able to remove any bad stuff before restoring it fully into the network in production. So that's a very, very powerful option for ransomware protection, because I can have peace of mind of not having to roll far back. And you can create that recovery time or recovery point objective based on a group of applications and apply it to different things with, 15 minutes is fine, or maybe, every 5 hours is fine for a file share, or once a day for a file share, all the way down to, 10 seconds or less using our continuous data protection engine. It's a very, very robust and powerful option. And that movement from performance tier to capacity tier is that object immutable move. You can also use archive tier, which will then integrate from object at capacity tier to a deep archive object platform that retains that immutability off site. Right now, that would be Amazon S3 at capacity would only work with Amazon S3 Glacier, or Microsoft Azure Blob would work with the Blob archive storage. So those two things are there now, and they again are based on a tiering mechanism and a plan that you set up beforehand so that you can maximize your investment. Okay. So here are some kind of best effort, some tips that I've got based on experience, both with me personally or with our support engineers and with new cloud support teams, to see things that they have come up with. Here's some ways that we can try to mitigate some of these. So because remember, I'm reiterating that this tool set is not comprehensive, but it is also not a one-stop, just do this one magic thing, and all of a sudden you protect yourself from ransomware forever. You have to do a lot of things in tandem to overlap and protect each other. So you want really resilient copies? We'll make sure that you're following the 3-2-1 rule. That the best way to recover with resiliency is to have things presented and available in multiple locations so that you can recover. If you're not following the 3-2-1 rule, then this will could become a problematic breakdown for you where it would fail. So you want to make sure that you have your backup copies encrypted, but also make sure that you don't lose those encryption passwords. So there's a lot of great ways that you can proactively maintain and keep your passwords and encryption algorithm keys safe. And we would encourage you to absolutely do that. You want to make sure that you're separating duties so that you don't use the same service account for Veeam on every other person in the same network, right? So you don't want Cisco's service account and Microsoft service account and Veeam service account to be the same username and password, because now one person can go into any other environment. So just make sure that you're separating your roles, separating duties, and giving privileges at the minimum layer necessary for each employee to do their job. Multi-factor authentication. It's not always convenient to have to answer your phone and get a passcode every time, but it's sure powerful and very, very important, very necessary, and is built into our product lines. You want to use MFA whenever possible. Tapes at a library. Make sure that you're doing tape rotations, right? How do I verify that my tapes are good? Well, sometimes you'll have to do a test restore to make sure that the tape has itself not degraded over time. And that's one of the benefits of using something like object and capacity/archive tiers. So you don't have to worry about the media itself corrupting over time as it degrades over time like tape can. And then make sure you understand what priorities exist for you, for your crown jewel applications. You want to ensure that you know which applications and which servers and services need to be online first and in what order. The last thing you want to do when you're having a problem and need to address by failing over is waiting to boot up a file share so that it wastes 15, 20 minutes when you should have been able to just run SQL backups to restore quickly or immediately, and then the file share can come on later. So just make sure you have that plan laid out and created in a run book so that you and your entire team know exactly what to do. Test your restores. Absolutely do this. You can actually set up scheduled times in the software to automatically test it, run some scripts that you want it to do. So you can set it up to say, here's my SQL application. I want my SQL server online. I want you to run the login test to verify that I have the right credentials. I want you to then do a heartbeat test to make sure the servers are online. And I want you to turn on the databases and run this query, and then return the query output back to me. And then you can, based on that schedule, it will then send you an email report of what happened. Did it work? Did it not work? What pieces broke? What are some remediation ideas to make it so it's not broken? How to fix that? And you can schedule that job to run whenever you need it to. Most of my customers will probably do it monthly, just to be safe. And make sure, make sure that you've got somewhere to fail over to, that it's ready. You want to make sure you have all the components ready to go that you would need. And that can be either something that's in another data center that you own with your assets, or something like what NewCloud is, which is a great target for them because they can do more than just active storage, right? They can work with you and design that customized failover plan and have you guys ready to go, but also not having to pay an arm and a leg by keeping it online all the time. You can work with them to determine what makes sense for you and your business in those applications. But you always want to make sure you have that plan in place. And one very important piece of that being ready, make sure you have copies of all of your Veeam servers config files. By default, the config file is written to the local C drive of the server when you first deploy it, but you will definitely want to move that and either just onto like a USB drive, into a file share somewhere off-site from that server, so that at any point in time, should you lose access to the Veeam backup server, you can immediately use that config file and import it into another Veeam server, and I see all of my data and I can do all my restores immediately. So you want to have that ability to import that config to recover faster. Rotating drives. If you're using tape especially, that's something you want to look at. Sometimes people will do rotating drives either with a USB device or a small NAS array, just to kind of move things around that way. That's totally fine. Just figure out which way you want to do that. And if you get stuck on the process, obviously reach out to us, NewCloud or Veeam, and we'll be able to help you with that. Strong user passwords. Passwords tend to be the bane of a human's existence because we try to make them so complex with so many characters, it's hard to remember. So make sure you're looking at the best practices. We've found over time as an industry that passwords based on key phrases that you remember all the time are actually more powerfully secure because you remember what they are. They're very difficult to hack. And when we try to do a brute force attack, bunches of random characters are how a computer thinks. So from their perspective, it can be easier, not that it's easy, for a computer to go after a brute force attempt with lots of random characters than it would be to come up with a very long, important passphrase that you can remember very simply like, you know, a line from your favorite book, something like that. Make sure that you have frequent copies and different types and the different types of backloads and protection schemas. So we can integrate with storage snapshots. Um, we can do replication jobs, which are different than backup jobs, but that's where you would get that RTO of or RPO of 15 seconds or less kind of thing. Your crown jewel applications, I can fail over that entire application group immediately, or orchestrated and automated doing it all. But I have that core group of things ready to go in a replica, because that replica job would be set up with a failover plan, including boot order, any tests you need to do to validate before it's coming on, virus scrubbing, all that kind of stuff. Backup copy jobs are great for offsite protection. New Cloud is great at using these as a target with Cloud Connect to help do a lot of that mitigation for offsite 3-2-1 rule. Having backups in a third location is also great, or even local backup, production copy, local backup in the same area, and then offsite somewhere else as necessary. And then we've already talked a little bit about air gapped with air gap tape or a VTL. Still very, very viable. One of the best, if not the best way to protect against ransomware. But it has its plus and minuses as well, in that restore times will take longer from tape. That's just the nature of how tape works. One of the great things about going to New Cloud specifically as a offsite copy is they run what's called Veeam Cloud Connect or VCC. Specifically to our Cloud Connect server, our customers, our service provider customers, have the ability to protect themselves from an insider deletion or an accidental deletion on their customer at the tenant side. So we, by default, will create a backup. If somebody deletes it for whatever reason, it goes into a recycle bin and sits there for whatever number of days you tell it to be there. I believe the default is 14. But most of my customers will either keep it 14 or go up to 30. So now you have a few weeks worth of data there sitting in that recycle bin, so that you can go back and recover and pull that out in case something was accidentally deleted or insider deleted something intentionally. So we've talked a lot about this already. Keeping things offline and air gapped, using immutability. And there are a couple of different immutable strategies here that we haven't dove into yet. So we've covered most of these things, the differences between a replica and a backup. But one we didn't go over to detail yet is the hardened Linux repository. So this is a new feature from VBR v11 that came out in the beginning of the year. And it's essentially what it does is we can take advantage of using a local Linux repository using the XFS file system. And from there, we can use XFS to set an immutable flag locally on that Veeam repository that's a Linux machine. So it's different immutability settings than it would be using object storage going off-site. It's meant to say that I can't change or encrypt or delete any of those backups locally as well for whatever period of time. Say about 7 days, with 14 days. Sometimes you see people try to do 2 weeks. But so it adds that other layer of protection. The one thing to be cognizant of is that just because of the nature of it being Linux, the way that it's configured and set up for XFS, administrators or pseudo users can still go in, and they can't manipulate the data, but they can go in there and remove the disks. So this is not as perfect for insider protection. That's where the recycle bin would be very valuable, right? And you can kind of see that transition of overlapping strategies. So, and a lot of customers I have will use the Linux hardened repository that includes not only a bunch of immutability, but a bunch of other security best practices in the kernel and in the configuration file. And they'll use that in tandem with object immutability so that I can go local protection with insider protection to help in case an administrator does something on accident or on purpose, or I've got off-site protection using an S3 API call that's also unalterable and protected off-site. So using those three pieces really improves your ability to be resilient and recover from ransomware. Mixed repositories is a great thing. And this is great because you don't want to necessarily have all users exposed to the same potential bug or security flaw. So using repositories with Windows, with Linux as repositories, a NAS device, or file shares, there's a lot of different ways that you can use different repositories, infrastructure components to really help mitigate so you don't have one vendor causing all problems. You know, if EMC or if NetApp had a specific bug that came up and all of your stuff is using and susceptible to that particular bug, that's a level of risk we can mitigate by using different types of repositories. I mentioned a little bit with the hardened repository that it does more than just immutability. And that is true. In this screenshot, you're seeing what we can do here with the various immutable options, including what are the security settings between some of these things when it's, oh, hey, this is locked, I can't delete this. Because and so you're seeing the different attributes for these files, what they mean and what you can do. And again, we do have a script that was created by one of our employees here internally that goes over a Linux hardening process that will shut down different kernel pieces, network ports, any other kernel issues that they want to set down, file attribute side controls that will harden that server dramatically. So it's very, very difficult to get into and break. So using XFS and immutability is a big, big deal, but it's also, we have details on what else you can do with that Linux repository to keep it secure and protected and online. And that those scripts are available upon request at our GitHub site or by reaching out to your Veeam SE directly, or NewCloud would be able to help with that as well, of course. VLAN segmentation is critical. Make sure that you use different networks, different username and passwords. I have customers who would prefer to use Active Directory for production systems, but for backup storage, they tend to use workgroups, or they will isolate things in different VLANs or different IP schemes altogether. And that just makes it harder for somebody or for ransomware to go in and cross into different domains or from a domain to a work group or into different networks to just kind of help segment and protect different pieces physically. So I know that was a lot of information. I hope this answers some questions around what Veeam can do and what we want to do for you to help you protect against ransomware. And just to be resilient on any workload, at any application, at any time that you need it. We've got a strategy to help, and we are always willing to help make it work for you. Your success is what drives our success. NewCloud is, again, one of the best in the business at what they do as a service provider. They're phenomenal people to work with and have some of the sharpest technical talent that I've ever met in my life at their company. So they very, very great partner to use with us at Veeam. With that being said, I'll go ahead and turn the time back over to Sydney to close us out. And again, thank you for your time.
All right, thanks so much, Jim. Really appreciate the call out there. And with that, I want to talk a little bit about the key takeaway here is the fact that, as Jim said, NewCloud works very closely with Veeam. We want to offer your company total protection from cyber threats, and we do this by combining Veeam software with our ultra latency network of cloud hubs. And this really allows you to create a secure, encrypted, and automated backup of your data while getting them offsite quickly and pulling them back when you need them. And as Jim mentioned, with solutions like Veeam Backup and replication, you can get really granular with your restore to ensure you're isolating those compromised files and you're not recovering data that's going to reinfect your business. So it's a really great, powerful tool to leverage here. So I want to take a step back and just quickly give you some context of who NewCloud is for those of you who may be unfamiliar with us. So NewCloud is a cloud service provider. We've been in business since 1988. And obviously back then we weren't in the cloud business or called NewCloud. That would have been some great foresight on our part. But our background is in networking, and we've evolved several times over the years to adjust our offerings according to the changes in technology. And as such, we've amassed over 1,000 customers in the US and in Europe. And we are a platinum level partner with Veeam. And we're actually one of the first partners to launch Cloud Connect with Veeam, which is something we're pretty proud of. We've built a reputation for quality within our industry as a result. And our SLA and our customer satisfaction rating do a really great job of exemplifying that. And in fact, our relationship and our skill set with Veeam is actually one of the driving factors for why Otava actually acquired us this year. So lots of great changes on the new cloud side with the transition to Otava as well, and great things to come. This map is actually a breakdown of our nationwide ultra low latency cloud network. This network is designed and built for backup and disaster recovery. And when we talk about building a cyber resilient backup and DR strategy, it's really important to have your data both far enough away from your main site so that it won't be affected by the same natural disaster, and also close enough so that it's usable when you actually need to stand up those VMs. And NewCloud actually controls the bandwidth and latency between all of these locations, which ensures that our customers' data is always usable. So if your company is hit by a cyber threat or a ransomware attack, this means that we can get your data and backup and replicas to you very quickly, limiting or eliminating downtime. Now, we work hand in glove with Veeam to bring our customers best-in-breed solutions. Thus, we have a variety of Veeam offerings that we support, and our engineers are Veeam certified and work to implement Veeam technology very quickly. We actually even offer a automated provisioning of Veeam services, which is something that none of our competitors are currently doing via a web store today. At least at the caliber that we're doing it as well, and the managed services aspect that we're offering in addition. So we offer all of the Veeam services for everything from backup and disaster recovery to backup and disaster recovery assessments as well. So what makes us great? At NewCloud, we believe that great technology is powered by great people, and we're always being asked what sets us apart from the likes of Amazon and Microsoft, and our answer is always the same. We believe in personalized service. We're not a 1-800 number, and our customers can rest assured that we have top engineers available to them 24/7 by 365 to help with whatever comes up. And we know that no two companies are the same, so we don't believe in cookie cutter solutions. We work really closely with our customers to ensure we're developing solutions that are addressing their core business needs. And we implement these solutions using the best in breed technology providers that we've talked about here. And we work to make sure that our solutions are implemented at an affordable cost. So the bottom line is that we believe in taking care of our customers. So I want to thank everyone for joining the webinar today. I hope you learned a lot about building a cyber resilient business. And the most important thing to remember again is that you are not exempt from an attack. Your company will face something like this in the near future, but proactively preparing can make all of the difference. So what's next? You've heard a lot about NewCloud, you've heard a lot about Veeam. Now we want to talk to you about your unique business needs and understand how we can help. We have a free trial of our backup solution available for you if any of you are out there interested in kicking the tires and testing features. You can reach out to us directly to get more information on downloading that. Or if you have any questions, you can take a screenshot here of our emails on the screen, and we're happy to answer anything on a one-off basis as well. And without any further ado, I will go ahead and take a look at some of the questions that have come in through the chat. A lot of them are really excited about the capabilities that Veeam has built in Veeam 11 around ransomware protection. Someone asked, hey, I've heard that ransomware can affect more than just production. It also can affect backups. Can NewCloud and Veeam protect that? So Jim, I'll kind of throw that over to you to talk a little bit about how that's built in with
Sure.
Veeam.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why we exist. And there's a reason why Veeam continues to steal market share at double-digit growth every year, because we do that very, very well. Backups are critical, and we take that responsibility very seriously. So yes, your backup environment, it can get attacked just like a production environment can. It's harder because you have to have a lot more control and crawl into a customer's uh, system to be able to know where their uh, different data pieces are to be able to cross into a different platform. But that's why we have all the different protections we talked about today with um, immutability protection, hard Linux repos, separate VLANs, using different networkings, work groups versus Active Directory for backup servers, Worm and air gap, with Tate. All of those different ways are made and created specifically to not only protect your production environment, but protect your backup copies of your production environment for as long as you need.
Great, thanks, Jim. And a follow-up question to that one. If I have a file or server corrupted with ransomware, is my only option to stand it up in a new cloud data center?
No, I mean you can restore that to wherever you'd like, and it doesn't even need to stay. If you it's or if, what if it was a Hyper-V machine and you're targeting a VMware system? Not a problem either. We can go back and forth from anything into VMware or from anything into a Hyper-V system, wherever you need. You can also restore directly into any cloud you decide, either being at new clouds infrastructure, your own hosted infrastructure somewhere else, somewhere in Azure or Amazon or IBM or Google. We can make all of that work very, very seamlessly. Um, it's just a matter of what your needs are and what's the most effective way to design it for those needs. But we can do it all.
Awesome. Next question is, how fast can I spin up a Cloud Connect environment in a new cloud data center? And that's really dependent upon the size of your data. If you're using Cloud Connect or Cloud Connect replication, we can do that a lot quicker than if you're not currently using Cloud Connect or Cloud Connect replication, and we have to kind of set you up as a new customer. So that's kind of a one-off discussion of your specific environment. So, we can have anything up from as little as 12 hours to, it could take a little bit longer if you have a larger data set. So definitely reach out on an individual basis to talk that through. And with that, it looks like we are all out of the questions there. And so I will close out this webinar. And again, thank you everyone for your time today, and really appreciate you letting us kind of go over cyber resilience with you. So have a great rest of your day.